The fact that so many of us have been eating buffalo meat for so long, and the buffalo is acceptable because he's Yama's Vahan, and because he's black, and because we are racist. That is another question. So I've seen that in parts of Haryana, where they will kill the male calf rather than sell it to somebody or let somebody else eat it. हम लोग नहीं खाते, हमारी जरूरत नहीं है, हम उसको मार देंगे. How is that right? There are Maharashtrians who will eat sheep but not goat. They will eat goat but not sheep. Today, milk has increased in cost by over 60%. Why has it increased in cost?
Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you on Emotionally Yours with Pratik. Today we've got with us, we are honored to have with us Dr Kurush Dalal. And Kurush, very warm welcome to you for this show on Emotionally Yours with Pratik. Kurush is somebody who comes across as somebody who's full of humor, full of knowledge, wisdom, and a lot of other things. When we met first, the first thing that I noticed about him was his sense of humor. Not only that, his deep knowledge about history and how it is connected with human beings. So, I would like to start with complimenting Kurush because this is the first shoot of the day that I'm doing, and it's a fantastic way to start by welcoming a Baba on the show, by the way. All right, leaving that aside, Kurush, it's been real pleasure to have you on the show, and let us understand how your journey towards studying history started and what was the role of your emotions in it.
So thank you very much, Pradeep. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be on the show with you. And my journey into history started primarily because of my mother, secondary because of the rest of the family. So my mother was a PhD in archaeology. She did her bachelor's in history, in AIC, as it was called then, Ancient Indian Culture and History.
Right.
Then she went on to do a master's in Ancient Indian Culture, History and Archaeology from Deccan College, Pune. And then she did a PhD from Pune University. She was one of the first few women to actively work in field archaeology at a time when very few women actually took to the field because it was considered the kind of job that women were too frail to do. So I grew up with a mother who was deeply immersed in history and archaeology, and when everybody else was getting nice, happy, sweet fables and tales, the stories that I grew up on were of interesting people who changed the world in different ways, and some of them were incredibly bloodthirsty. So I remember my mother talking about Alexander, who was one of her favorite characters in history. And
Alexander the Great.
Yes.
Okay.
And how he, started off as a young 16-year-old and ultimately created an empire the size of which the world had never seen. And, he hacked and burned and slaughtered his way from Macedonia all the way to the borders of India, halfway back before he died. And then, stories of Ashoka Maurya coming to the throne of Magad, his hands stained in the blood of his brothers. And I lapped it all up. This is all exciting stuff. My paternal grandfather was a great fan of the empire. He was more British than the British.
All right.
Yeah, he firmly believed that we made a mistake throwing the British out. I'm not going to make excuses for him. He's long gone. His main complaint was the streets of Bombay were washed every day when the British ran Bombay, and the streets of Bombay were full of crud as far as he was concerned after independence. That was his number one bugbear.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous today, but so he had a lot of stories to tell, especially about he started off as a grunt in the Bombay docks.
Okay.
He was 16 years old. He failed his 10th standard twice. In those days, there were no grace marks. So the first time by some 3 or 4 marks, and the second time by 7. And they tried to put him into something technical. So he worked in a mill for a few months and didn't like it at all, hated it. And his mother, who was a widow, through some connections, got him into the Indian Navy on the shore side.
Oh.
And when he finished, he was a gazetted officer. He was civil foreman of Bombay docks. And years and years later, people would tell me about him, you're his grandson.
Okay.
That kind of thing. He was also a true Parsi in the sense that he could curse in 5 languages without stop for at
That's
least 30 minutes.
fantastic.
Yeah. And some of them were very inventive. So at an early age, I was shuffled off to boarding school when I was about, I think, 12, because my mother felt that he was being a little too much of an influence on me,
Having all the kind of curses and the abuses.
My father was a very avid reader. He was out at sea. He seen the world early. So his stories were very different. My grandmother was a very devout Zoroastrian, my maternal grandmother. I didn't know my paternal grandmother. So she told me a lot of traditional mythological stories of heroes from Persia and things like that. So there was a lot of history, mythology, archaeology, growing up from a very early age. I'm talking about between 3 and 5 and things like that. I remember going out to sea with my father. The first journey I don't remember really well, just very small snippets. I was 3. The second time I was 5. And I remember we went to the Louvre in Paris. And this has been one of my mother's bucket list things, to see the Louvre. I was 5 years old. And we stood in a line to see the Mona Lisa. And this is one of my very early memories. I got there. And I looked at the guard who was very proudly standing there next to it. And I said, ours is bigger. And my mother almost died of embarrassment because we had a rather large Mona Lisa at home, a copy. And here was this little Mona Lisa.
Ours is a bigger one.
So, there was that kind of thing. So there was a lot of, so got to see the world early, Pratik. Got to see different people, got to see what you can do if you have a will to do it. One of our closest family friends was a Second World War survivor in Germany.
Okay.
And lived in Hamburg, which had been completely devastated. They firebombed Hamburg. And she and her mother built their lives again systematically over the years. I mean, if you'd gone to her house when I was a kid, I was so impressed by the little garden behind, the gorgeous house. By the way, it had a bomb shelter. So as a kid, a house with the bomb shelter was up the bomb. And how much love there was for each other across the world. I think the 70s and 80s were slightly happier times. From the middle of the 90s, we've moved into slightly more bitter times. So all of these influences, I decided I was going to be a physicist.
Physicist?
So I was not going to be a historian. I loved history. It was great fun. But I was going to be a physicist. My hero was Freeman Dyson. I was going to create the Dyson sphere that he talked about. I was going to do a double PhD. The dream was, unlimited. And when you're young, so when I was very young, of course, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Okay.
I was probably the only man in India who hated Rakesh Sharma. He stole my dream. He became the first astronaut instead of me. Damn! Yeah. I mean, came to grips with my emotions a little later in life. But I really hated him for doing this to me. I mean, he'd taken away my purpose in life when I was 10. So I wanted to be a physicist. I was going to be a nuclear physicist and an astrophysicist. I really loved space. And I loved everything science fiction. And I saw how science fiction kept predicting what was going to come actually. So I failed spectacularly in my 12th in physics. So honestly, it was not possible. I was pretty good at it. But I did. I appeared again and I got 36 on 100. At which point I decided that if I was going to pass with 1 mark, I was better off not doing it. So this is when I shifted to ancient Indian culture and history. And through a very interesting kind of change of college that took place for some unfortunate reasons, I ended up going to Xavier's. And I had some very good teachers. So, Pratik, I've been very lucky in my life. Very, very lucky. I've had very few bad teachers. Equally few mediocre teachers. I've had some spectacularly good teachers. And all they wanted was for it to be paid forward.
Right.
There is no thank you. We are doing our job. Your job is to take it forward. And, I regularly have this problem in India, Pratik. I have people who tell me things like, oh, sir, you are my guru. if I'm half as good as you? And I'm like, that should not be your aim.
Objective.
Yeah, your objective should be to be better than me. So how can I be better than you? If you're not better than me, I have failed you.
Oh, yeah, that's
I have
how
failed
it
you.
is.
It is how it is. Because look, if every generation is stupider than their gurus and dumber than their gurus, then we are dumbing down the world at a ridiculous rate. We've got to stop this subservience. You know, your teacher is your God and all that is fine. But you have to transcend your teacher. When you fly higher, there should be nobody happier than your teacher.
Absolutely. Very well said.
So, you know, this is what brought me to archaeology, the pursuit of the past, wanting to know history, wanting to know where we came from, wanting to really help fill in some blanks in this vast canvas. You know, we probably, you know, Pratik, there is 2.6 million years that human beings have been in South Asia.
Correct.
Of which 2,700 years is history. That's less than 0.1% of the past. So the rest is all archaeology. Whether you like it or you don't like it, you don't have to love it.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's a fact. This is what it is. So to me, archaeology was a way of answering some questions. Maybe there would be one question that I would answer, you know, leave behind my mark and help clarify a few other answers. And that would be a life well lived, according to me. So this is how I came into it. And I was hooked.
History hooks you, for sure.
Totally.
I mean, I inherited it from my father, who was a historian. And as children, we were taken to most of the historical places across India and then later on at the world. Of course, Louvre being one of them. Okay, though I didn't do some crazy thing that you did. Because it was much later in my life.
In my defense, I was 5.
All right, you do. All right. So you know, I absolutely agree that it's a quest where you go in and you understand from where you came, who were your ancestors, how did it evolve over the period of time. This is very interesting, and the very base of it is curiosity.
Oh, completely.
Unless you are curious, you're not going to really be better than what you are. So what really made you to transit from studying archaeology to food?
So my mother was to blame again.
Oh, she's a great cook, I believe.
So she was.
She was a great cook.
But that is not the reason.
Right.
So my mother finished her PhD in archaeology. She was one of the first independent women to carry out an excavation in India. She worked on the Indo-Pakistan border. They even got lost and ran across the border one day and then had to quickly come back.
Wow.
Yeah. She slept with this ridiculous chopper under her pillow. She'd been given a jeep by the BSF because the BSF commandant heard that she wanted to work in this area. He said he's so proud that an Indian woman wanted to work here and a Parsi woman at that he would ensure that she had a guard, a driver and a cook. So she did a lot of her field work there. Both my grandfathers in turn kind of chaperoned her for some time. And when she came back, there were no jobs for her. You see, because you were a woman, you were not supposed to do this. And now that you've done it, you would keep doing it and make us look bad. So there were no jobs. So she came back to Bombay. She'd got married. I was already here by then. And she tried teaching college. And she found that teaching, you know, what was called in those days inter-arts, what is today HSC.
Correct.
College was not floating the boat for her at all. This is not what she had spent all her life achieving.
Correct.
And she gave it up. She said, it's not working for me. I can't handle these 80, 90, 120 student classrooms. I feel that we are doing a disservice to them and I can't do this. And my father was out at sea most of the time. We had a very close family friend who moved from Fort to Andheri.
Okay.
And you know, in those days, Andheri was a very up and coming place in the back of beyond. And Borivali was unheard of.
Right.
This must have been around 78, 77.
Around late 70s.
Late 70s. And he came over home one day and he said, you know, he used to keep dropping by 3-4 times a week because after they moved, he couldn't go home for lunch.
Oh.
And he worked right next door to us at Ballad Estate. And So one day he came home and said, look, Katie, I've got to talk to you very seriously. Katie was my mother's name. And he said, I want you to send me dabba to my office every day. So my mother said, dabba? Okay, fine. ऐसे भी 5 जन का खाना घर पे पकता है तो 6 जन का पकेगा. Big deal. Right? We're always happy to have friends come over. He said, no, but you got to take money. And my mother was, don't be stupid. And he was, nahi. I realized that I've been coming here more than half the days of the month. This is just not right. आप मुझे डब्बा भेजो and I will
pay for it.
So after a lot of gitch, they both decided on a price, and my mother's dowry was a lady called Parvati Kadam. We used to jokingly call her my mother's dowry. She had been trained by my grandmother, who was a brilliant cook, and she'd been sent after my mother got married with her, so that my mother didn't embarrass my grandmother.
So that's the dowry.
That's my mother's dowry.
Correct.
So she was like a maushi to all of us, especially to me growing up. And she was this, in later years, more stout, in early years, not so stout.
Correct.
Lovely Maharashtrian lady who always wore a kashti all her life. A huge 1 rupee size, original 1 rupee size tilak on her head. Kunku. And hard as nails. Huh? And well, as luck would have it, Parvati would finish cooking lunch for us, put lunch on the table, and go off with a little plastic bag with tiffin carrier in it to give tiffin dabba. And after a few days, we asked the gentleman to have 2 tiffin dabbas, so she didn't have to go back to collect the empty one.
Correct.
And it was working fine. 15 days later, he turned up and said, look, these are my friends. They are eating my dabba. I am not getting to eat my dabba. You please start them on dabba also.
Wow.
And that is how my mother became a caterer.
Entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. It was completely organic and it was completely out of the blue. There was no plan to do this. Then people started saying, Katie auntie, we are having a party at home. Will you make your pulao for us? Will you make this for us?
Wow.
And my mother had spent a lot of time with my dad at sea. And she'd seen the world. So she'd seen a lot of food. You know, in those days, salads, bakes and things like that were unheard of. So it was very exciting to do things like that. Lobster thermidor, prawns Newburgh, fish Florentine. So Katie auntie does this very well. And when I was about 10, 9 or 10, we had a gentleman come on and say, Katie, it's my child's Navjot. Parsis have a thread ceremony like a Janev. It's called a Navjot.
Correct.
Very important for most Parsis.
Right.
And he said, I have got 3 caterers in the family. They can't cook to save their lives, according to me. I love your food. Will you do the catering for us? Now, we'd never done a catering of this size. And so my mother said, look, I don't know where to get the staff from, where to get big bartans from, ye wo sab dunyadari. Kidhar se aayega?
Right.
So he said, I know everything. I'll give you all the people. Everything comes on hire. There is a mukadam for staff in the kitchen. There is a mukadam for staff for serving. I'll show you where you can pick up your bhandi bartan from, where you can pick up your koila sigdis from, who's the koila wala over there. He said, I'll give you everything. Just please do it for us.
Wow.
So, and she was a woman who never took no for an answer. She firmly believed that if a man could do it, a woman could do it twice as well. No nonsense about it.
Absolutely.
And she just decided to take the plunge. And for the next, I don't know, at least 25 years, she just steamrolled her way through Parsi catering. And then we had a very unfortunate incident one day where the mukadam who would bring the service staff turned up and said, rate increase karke do, nahi to chokra log nahi aayega. And my mother said, you finish today's party, we'll sit after that and we'll discuss things. You can't hold me at gunpoint. So he said, aap na bolega to hum log aadmi log hi nahi aayega. So this would happen usually at about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the men would come. So my mother said, that's fine. We'll do without you. मैं देख लेगा. So देखना, खाना खा के भी जाना.
Wow.
She was fully, I mean,
a lady of courage, I would say.
Totally. So she looked at me and said, Kurush, what can we do? I was in my 11th standard at that time.
Okay.
So I said, मेरा सब दोस्त लोग को बुलाता है. So I went out with a handful of 1 rupee coins, called up all my friends. Wow. It was a Sunday, luckily. And about 7-8 of them turned up. And my grandfather turned up from Bandra. and a couple of other friends turned up. My mother sent all of her kitchen staff out. She and Parvati Bhai Kadam took over the kitchen and said, "Abhi khana pak gaya hai na. We will set it out for you all. You all just serve that." Those days was pangat.
Correct.
Banana leaves. That is the day she decided, I will now stop doing banana leaves. I will not let anybody hold me for ransom. The next season, she started pushing buffets. And she said, buffet mein, I'll give you what nobody else can give you. Cold cut platters, entire roast hams, lobsters on ice. We did some absolutely crazy food way before, the envelope. And from the time I finished my boarding school, I was in charge of going to the market and picking up things. Chicken lane ka subah, mutton lane ka, machi market jane ka, climbing up 3 flights of stairs. We lived on the 2nd floor. We rented 2 rooms on the 3rd floor where we had our kitchen. Chicken ice water gently dribbling down my back, climbing up 3 floors with it, because she firmly believed that you got to know how to do everything.
Correct.
It started when I was 11. I told her I wanted to be a caterer like her. And I thought, what a good business office. You do this, you do that, you get this, you get that. This is what I want. Correct. She said, really? I said, yes. And she said, fine. She called the tailor and made me a waiter's uniform. Now, in our line of work, Pratik, nothing is lower than a waiter. Even the bhandi bartan pocha wala is a permanent job. Waiters come and waiters go.
Correct.
I was appalled. I was highly insulted. My mother wanted me to be a waiter. Okay? And she rounded up the staff, and there was this old gentleman called Mr. Matus. And she said, Matus, if I find anybody cutting him slack, I will fire them. Okay? So after school, I'd come back and I'd be a waiter.
No.
For 1 month, I learned how to be a waiter. Matus was hard on me like hell. From there, I went to Jhadu Pocha. From Jhadu Pocha, I went to Bartan. Bartan big enough for me to sit in and probably do the dog paddle. Okay? From there, I went to peeling.
Okay.
Peeling was fun. Okay? From peeling, I went to chopping. It was not a lot of fun. I cut myself 3-4 times. My teachers would keep asking me, the bandit lal kai ko aa raha hai school mein? I said, cut gaya haath. Sabji kaat raha tha. 11 saal ka bachcha sabji kaat raha tha. Whatever. Then I went to stirring.
Okay.
That was hard, man. We used to use these big coal-fired sigris. And inside, in summer, the temperatures would be crazy. You'd be like soaked in minutes.
Bombay summers.
Yeah, Bombay summers, and this heat is on. And you're cooking, so the steam. It's a killer combination. So after stirring, I would have become what is called a malwala, which means the guy in charge who puts out the masalas. That's where my education was cut short. You're not cut out for that yet. You can't reach that stage. But thanks to that, Pratik, I learned every single bloody step of the way. When I was about 4 or 5 months into this apprenticeship, we were catering at this rather large place called All Bless Bagh in Bombay, which had 2 kitchens, because in the old days there'd be 2 caterers, girls side, boys side.
Correct.
But by my time, that had almost disappeared. So we used to use the roti wala would use that kitchen, the starters wala would use that kitchen, the mains would be here. My mother would go home in the early evening, change and come back. And then do a quick tour to see whether everything was on the ball. And we were doing our walkthrough. And namak kami hai.
Oh.
This must have been...
Just by sniffing?
Yeah, this must have been about 15 feet away. Huh?
Oh.
And walked by. And immediately at that time, one of our top cooks, Costa, leaned over the handi, said, namak kami hai.
My God.
I was like, balls. Come on, guys. You
Unless
can't
taste it.
If you don't taste it, how will you know? So he said, so this was the line. Baba, तुमको salt smell करने को नहीं आता है? So I said, किसको भी salt smell करने को नहीं आता है? For the next 6 months, suddenly a spoon would appear in front of me. Baba, smell karo, abhi taste karo. Baba, smell karo, abhi taste karo. Sometimes it would be oversalted, sometimes it would be undersalted, sometimes it would be correct. They were driving me mad and I couldn't understand what was happening. And then one day, Pratik, it was like, dimag mein laddu futa. Epiphany moment. Suddenly it was like, I can tell. I can tell by smelling.
Oh.
And, it's hard to describe if you're not into it. But oversalted food smells chemically. You can smell the chlorine when there's too much salt. Undersalted food smells flat. Correctly salted food has the right smell. It's as simple as that. And it was a complete hallelujah moment.
Oh.
I remember years and years later when I was courting my wife, she was cooking and I said, I haven't put salt in the dal today.
Oh.
And she said, what do you mean? I said, I can't smell the salt.
Quite a risky coating, I would say.
It was very automatic. It was very automatic. So she tasted the dal and said, yeah, damn, I forgot to put salt inside. You could actually smell it.
My.
So, this was my journey into food. And coupled with one other fact, Pratik, which is very important. My parents firmly believed that there was nothing like a stupid question.
Right.
There were only questions. Every question merited an answer. Sometimes the answer, if you were being a smart aleck, could be a clip behind your ears. Ek kanfat, as they say. But I was in my 5th standard and we were studying for the first time seriously the great mutiny of 1857 / First War of Independence / whatever you want to call it. Everybody has a different term for it. And the teacher said, you see, the soldiers had to bite the bullet with their mouth and the bullet was coated in beef and pork fat and this is why the mutiny started. So I put up my hand, said, Madam, why did they have to bite the bullet?
Why couldn't they smell it?
No, why do they bite a bullet? I mean, you put your bullet in your gun, why do you bite it? Now, my dad's mama was an artillery man who had an entire gun case of his own. We all learned to shoot when we were kids. So I just spent summer learning how to shoot with him. And I was like, you take bullet, open, point down, put bullet, close, cock the gun, look around before you put it on your shoulder. The whole drill. You never bite the bullet. Ye biting wala nonsense kya hai? So she was damn upset. She said, shut up and don't ask stupid questions. Sit down. I went to घर पे गया और बाप को बोला. My dad was there that time. He was down. One of those trips, he was down from sea, and I said, she said, don't ask stupid questions, but she couldn't explain to me why. My father said, I also don't know why. But I'll find out exactly what it is. He spent 3 days in the Asiatic Society. That's where I learned about the Asiatic Society. That's where I learned that you could take daily membership.
Right.
Okay. And he came back with sketches. And he explained to me that the new musket that had been created, the Lee Enfield musket, instead of having to open your powder horn, put out a measured bit of powder, then take out a bullet, then put a patch, then take out your ramrod and ram it in, which took a lot of time. What they did was they would take a tube, put a piece of paper inside it, twist one end like a chocolate, fill the correct measure of your gunpowder, put the ball on top and twist it shut from the other end and slide it out. So that was one cartridge, not a bullet. Okay? And these were made in boxes of 20 and given to the soldiers. You bit off the bullet, you poured in the gunpowder, spat the bullet in, crumpled up the paper and shoved it in. So all of this made you twice as fast when you were shooting. And to make sure that the bloody gunpowder didn't go puss, they had to laminate it. And their candles were all made of tallow, which was beef and pork fat. So basically it was candle wax for them, in which these things were being dipped to be made waterproof. So there was no deep-rooted conspiracy on their part. They just didn't use their brains about Indians intrinsically not being
culturally sensitive.
Yeah, they were not culturally sensitive. They were completely insensitive to this. And this is why the whole thing blew up. So this is why you had to bite the bullet. This is where the term bite the bullet comes from. And I had a complete hallelujah moment. I was harami. I went to class and I explained to the whole class. Wow. Drew it on the board and all. The teacher was mad at me. I
can imagine
I was sent to the principal's office.
Oh.
He's teaching my class. So the principal asked me what happened. I told him. He said, this is what happened. So he asked the teacher, he said, did he teach anything wrong? And you did not know and you told him it was a stupid question. So he was right. You were wrong. I spent the next 3 or 4 months in school being very careful. Because my father gave me a tuppy and said, what is wrong with you? I explained to you. I didn't want you to go and put it up on the board there and piss off the poor teacher and make her look bad. So I learned that lesson also, that there must be humility. You learned how you can teach your friends. You don't make somebody look small just because they made you look small.
Correct.
So, these were the influences. These were the food, the history, the archaeology, you want to ask a question. We were a middle class family. So, daddy, I want, no. Mummy, I want, no. No was a standard answer unless it was a book. If it was a book, they would do everything they could to get me a copy. So all of this, this is the package that made it possible.
So, I'm quite wondering, right from an archaeologist or, somebody who's done excavation work, etc. at the border, to the catering business and to understanding. And those days, of course, when there was no Google, you had to go to libraries like Asiatic One and get the right thing done. So the element of curiosity, humility, all these things, we often say that these are the emotions that we carry every now and then. And since the show is about emotions, I always say that food and emotions are very well connected.
Oh, completely.
Unfortunately, later part of the 90s, as we were talking about, certain foods were paired with certain religions without really going deeper into the roots from where they evolved. So I'm sure you must have been asked questions related to, why the particular food is only for a particular community, or did it really originate from a particular religion or a connection? So how would you really...
So I'll tell you this, I completely agree with you that all food is highly emotional. Food, this is one of my favorite sayings, food is the greatest mnemonic. Yeah. Food brings back memories pouring in. Sometimes, it might be a very ordinary dish. Nothing great that fantastically exciting about it. But your memory and those emotions it evokes.
Nostalgia.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my grandmother, when I was not well, would buy apples, which were expensive, and stew them very slowly on a wick stove. The kerosene wala, wick wala stove, which you don't see any longer. And very slowly she'd make these stewed apples with a little bit of lime and some sugar and some cinnamon, one stick of dalchini. Very simple. But to me, stewed apples are my grandmother. They're my grandmother's love. They're how much she cared for me. And I feel a little bad because sometimes I cheated and told her I was not well just to eat stewed apples. So, things like this.
Right.
My grandmother would, so we are Parsis, we love eggs. My grandmother would only fry one egg at a time. She had a specific little kadai about this big, in which she would fry one egg in 1 teaspoon of ghee. Okay? Frilly on the edges, a gooey yolk, and absolutely crisp on the underside. I mean, again, those eggs, they're my grandmother.
Correct.
My wife makes them for me, and the moment I'm eating them, I'm thinking of my grandmother. And she's been gone these last,
so many
20 plus years. My mom would make scrambled eggs for us. And again, it was specific. My dad would make omelets at home. And he'd make fancy omelets. Heat some tomatoes on a fork, peel them, put them into a mixer with eggs and a little cream and salt, pepper, and whiz it up, and then make an omelet with that. And so all kinds of things. So these are little memories. These are emotions of people who have come, who have loved you, who have shared that love in life. And food is a love language.
Yeah.
But there are also moments when you have sad memories from food. Food that you've eaten at somebody's shraddh whom you love very much.
Right.
Or food that involves, an accident of some kind. Or food that a friend loved who's not there any longer.
True.
So many emotions. Food that you shared with someone you loved. First time you went out on a date and reached deep into your pocket to pay the bill, and what you ate that day. I mean, it could be a vada pav, it could be some fancy meal somewhere. So there is very rich emotion in food. Correct. And we've kind of made food very flat. Today food is like, jao khao bhao. Jao khao bhagao. And it's only now that food is once again beginning to mean something. And people say, I'm a foodie. And I keep thinking of my friend Kunal Vijay when people say that.
Right.
But I understand the sentiment. that they like their food, they're enjoying their food. People are beginning to enjoy food and experiment. You know, Pratik, when I was growing up, there was very few people understood what French food was or Italian food was, because you had to go to a 5-star hotel. Kisko parodega? So I was lucky enough that my mom experimented at home with these things. And that gave me an edge, you know, and haven't looked back.
Now the false narrative is food related to a particular religion or a particular thing, wherein your study of evolution of that food is all the more important, isn't it?
So, you know, Pratik, I tell people that throughout the Harappan period, throughout the entire Chalcolithic, be it the Deccan Chalcolithic, be it the Central Indian Chalcolithic, be it the Vindhyan Chalcolithic, the number one protein was beef.
Right.
The number one protein throughout the entire Bronze Age was beef. You come into the early historic period, the number one protein was beef. It's only after the Gupta era, thanks to a very increasing amount of Buddhism and Jainism talking about ahimsa, that meat eating has gone down. And with the revival of Hinduism in the post-Gupta period, that you actually see people of the upper castes not eating beef. The uppermost caste starts and then it goes downwards. And there are so many beautiful examples. Yajnavalkya, the great saint Yajnavalkya, in his Yajnavalkya Smriti says, I love eating beef, especially if it is tender and cooked well. Manu, the hated Manu of the Manusmriti, says if you do not accept beef as prasadam from the yagna, you will be born as pinworms in shit for 20,000 generations.
Ooh. Now that's something that is really deep inside. So people who fight about this beef actually need to know and read it.
My whole thing is eat and let eat. Aapko nahi khana, don't eat. To you it is sacred, don't eat. But to me it might not be. So if you let me eat what I want to eat and I let you eat what you want to eat, we can all be happy about it.
Absolutely.
Why should you tell me what I want to eat or what I don't want to eat? How many children I should have or shouldn't have? That should be my problem. That should not be your problem. Pork is taboo to Muslims and Jews and technically should be taboo to Christians also. But the Christians found a loophole. It's basically Leviticus that they're quoting. You know that beef is now taboo to most upper caste Hindus. And this is a truth. This is how food evolved for us. We realized that we didn't have enough land for enough cattle. We shifted to a renewable source of animal protein and renewable source of animal fat, milk. So we kept our cattle for milk. But where do you think all those male cattle were going? Somebody was eating them, no?
True.
Somebody was eating them. 50% of your cattle have to be male. Correct. There are not that many just wandering around, you know, sitting down at the katta and having a smoke and a chai. Right? So where are those animals going?
Correct.
Are you murdering those animals? That is another question. So I've seen that in parts of Haryana, where they will kill the male calf. They will kill the male calf rather than sell it to somebody or let somebody else eat it. हम लोग नहीं खाते, हमारी जरूरत नहीं है, हम उसको मार देंगे. How is that right? The fact that so many of us have been eating buffalo meat for so long, and the buffalo is acceptable because he's Yama's Vahan, and because he's black, and because we are racist at our core, and stuff like that. There are Maharashtrians who will eat sheep but not goat. They will eat goat but not sheep. So these are all cultural norms, and fair enough. If you want to eat sheep, good for you. You don't want to eat sheep, good for you. As long as you don't tell me what I should eat. What you should eat is your business. It is inside your house. It is your prerogative.
And when you take the things out of their context, everything looks a little narrative driven and a little different than what it actually meant to be. Right?
When you kill somebody because you think he is carrying beef. Not because you know he is carrying beef, because you think he is carrying beef.
You suspect.
Yeah. Now all cow farmers who are dairy farmers, when the cow stops giving milk, what do they do to the cow? They go and sell the cow at a mela, an animal mela, and they buy a young heifer or a cow which is now going to replace it. About 50% of the cost comes from the sale. 50% comes out of the pocket of the farmer. Now, if you stop them from selling these animals, what is going to happen? Your milk price goes up because he has got to feed that animal who's no longer productive.
True.
I am all for it. I'm all for make them feed the animal and all that. But then look at the repercussions. Today, since those rules have been well promulgated and passed, milk has increased in cost by over 60%. Why has it increased in cost? Why is the milk farmer in Maharashtra today screaming that they can't afford the government rate? Because the government rate is not even 50% of what milk is selling for to you and me in the cities.
True.
So how can a farmer afford this? Are you trying to kill the basic farmer? Then where will all our stuff come from? Because a small farmer cannot have a package. He cannot be Varana or Thote or whatever else.
Correct.
So he has got to go to the local dairy, the local cooperative. If you are giving him peanuts, he will start putting milk inside. He will give you spurious milk. Uska bhi papi pet ka sawal hai na. He has got children, he's got a wife, he's got parents. True. So we don't think of these things. India has some of the cheapest food in the world.
Yeah.
And we have this because we keep our farmers poor.
Very, very...
Not a very happy thing to hear.
Correct.
But a truth.
That's the way it is.
We feed ourselves today. And I tell my students in class, I say that we are all parasites. We are all food parasites. We do not grow our own food. That chili plant on your balcony is good fun to have. And those chilies taste so much better because you've grown them. But that's not farming. What we eat is farm surplus. Farm surplus. Farmer ने खुद के लिए जो बनाया और उसमें जो बचा, that is what the farmer is selling out. What happens if the farmer stops selling surplus, Pratik? They will not starve. We will. So what will we do? Take away the farmer's food? What are our options? Why are those farmers sitting in dharna in desperation? There must be some method in their madness. There must be some reason for this. We need to be a little more empathetic, a little more understanding. We need to sit with them, understand their problems, and we need to solve problems mutually. We cannot say the rural-urban divide is such that the urban doesn't give a damn about the rural and the rural is always under the thumb of the urban. We can't do that. We will destroy ourselves.
Very well put. And this is really how deep you go into the food. When it comes on the table, you understand, how much it has gone through in terms of, availability, in terms of labor, in terms of various aspects attached to it, right? Now, I remember you mentioning a particular incident where you were misquoted by our daily, and there were people who came to blacken your face with the ink and everything. And the way you narrated that incident to me when we met last time was so hilarious that I really understand that, emotion of anxiety, fear, etc. was completely out of it. How did you manage that A, and what was that incident B?
So, it's Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's Jayanti that has just gone by.
Correct.
So this is a rather right time to discuss this. The government of Maharashtra decided to build a statue to Chhatrapati in the bay in Mumbai at Marine Drive. And Mr. Fadnavis had just come to power. It was not he who mooted it, by the way. Right. It was the NCP who mooted it. Now, this is a poisoned plum, as we call it in politics. Nobody can go against this. Because in Maharashtra, if you want to stand in elections and win, and you go against creating a ginormous statue of Chhatrapati Maharaj, you will lose.
Correct.
Okay? It will be used as cannon fodder against you. So, everybody is going to build it. Let me ask you a question, Pratik. Why is it not built yet?
Yeah.
कितने साल हो गए ना?
Quite a
10 साल होने को तो आ गए.
Right.
अभी तक हम लोग बना ही रहे.
Just भूमि पूजन has been done. That's it.
क्या हमारा सीमेंट स्लो है क्या?
Right.
Like Banti ka sabun. So, what happened was I wrote a plea addressing it to Mr. Fadnavis on my Facebook page at that time. So, the midday got in touch with me and said, "Sir, we'd like you to write an op-ed out of this." So I said, very happy to do so. So I was flying out early next morning for a family function in Rajasthan.
Okay.
One of my cousins was getting married to a young man from Rajasthan. It was our first destination wedding in the family as such.
Okay.
So we were all excited about this. I wrote out the piece that evening, and about 8:39 I uploaded it to the midday people, and I left. Now, my mistake, I didn't give it a headline. The piece basically said that instead of building a statue to Maharaj, there are more than 360 forts that Maharaj controlled. These are his true Varsa.
True heritage.
And true heritage. And this heritage we should protect because they are falling and crumbling. We can take this heritage, make the people of the Konkan so proud of it, and give employment to the youth at these places. So please do that, and please don't build a statue. So because I forgot to put a headline, thinking it's an editorial piece, it will come under editorial. Headline ki zarurat nahi hai. The young person that day, whoever was there on the desk, put a sensational, sunny clickbait headline which said, "Why build statue for king who had nothing to do with Bombay?"
Oh.
Bas, that was enough.
Completely out of context.
Completely out of context. So I was then trolled all over the internet. There was a big Maratha organization which shot me out of a cannon in a cartoon.
Oh.
Yeah, all of that. So I was very proud to be caricatured. Few people get a chance to be caricatured like this. And I was safely sitting in Jaipur at that time. So they came to my office and they brought black ink with them. And they said, "Where is he?" And my staff said, "Sir, तो बाहर गए, किधर तो राजस्थान गए काम पे." And said, "कब आएंगे?" उनका कोई भरोसा नहीं, एक दो महीना नहीं आते. फील्ड वर्क को जाते हैं ना. So they thought I'd gone on field work.
Correct.
So one of those boys said, "लेकिन हम इंक खरीद के लेके आए." So she said, "मांगते तो छोड़ के जाओ इधर." I mean, what do you want us to do?
Thankfully, they didn't tell him that, वहां पर गए हैं जहां से महाराज के वंशज आए हैं, राजस्थान.
Precisely. So, the hypocrisy was that they did not read the piece.
Right.
The Chillam Chilli was all over the headline. I said, "But just read the article, no? We have put up the article text. Read the article, then come back at me. Then fire at me." People said, "Go back to Persia.
Oh.
You ingrate. India has given you everything. How dare you say this?" I said, "Bhai sahab, Persia kahan hai? Wo bol do, main abhi ja raha hu." 1300 years we have been here. We are more Indians
than anybody else.
Hey, abhi mazak ho gaya. So, all these personal slides, it's not hurtful, no, Pratik? It is hurtful, but at some time, you get into that very pious mode of saying, "I forgive you." You're coming from a point of complete and total ignorance. I forgive you. मैंने तेरे को माफ कर दिया. तेरे को बोलना है वो बोल. People threatened my life. People threatened my family. Oh. Then because I said that, don't be a coward and hide behind something on Twitter, somebody put me onto somebody else's page and said, "Sir, आपके बारे में ऐसे बोल रहा है." Various politicians were dragged in. Sensibly, the politicians decided to shut their mouths and stay out, which I am very grateful to them for. At least they used that much brain. But there was Chillam Chilli. These things last for a week, Pratik. कोई नया मुद्दा आ जाता है.
Public memory is anyway.
Public memory is very fragile. In fact, some years back when I wanted to find some of that stuff, I had to search like mad on my Facebook page to find out where I had been trolled. So, it happens. And what you realize from this, Pratik, is that there is so much history that we Indians should be so proud of. True. And yet we are fabricating history to be proud of, which is not history. Pseudo-history is fabricated to create pride when there is so much that we can be so intensely proud of.
Absolutely. I remember picking up an argument with somebody who was talking about how Britishers distorted the history and brought it in front of us. I said, have you ever heard of James Prinsep? He was the one who was instrumental in bringing Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in front of us. And the entire history of civilization was unfolded, which we ourselves did not.
John Marshall,
James Prinsep.
James Prinsep deciphered Brahmi. We couldn't read our own ancient script.
Right, he
deciphered Brahmi. He was a young boy working in the mint in Calcutta.
Correct.
So, who was the first person to translate the Manusmriti? The judge of the High Court of Calcutta, who started the Asiatic Society. That man was the first person to translate the Manusmriti, and it created such an interest in Indian texts. This is why Max Muller and others came down and wanted to study our stuff.
Absolutely.
So, we don't understand sometimes that. I'm not saying that the colonialists were any
Great.
good doodh mein dhule hue.
No.
They were
Nobody
absolute
is.
out and out assholes also.
Yeah.
But a lot of them did a lot of good stuff. India as it exists today would have not existed without the British.
Agree.
This India was not there ever before. Never. I mean, we can call it what we want to call it. It was never one India before the way it is today. We have the British to thank for it. Yes, it could have been bigger.
Yeah.
And yes, we have the British to thank for chopping off pieces of this India. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, this could have all been a greater India. It could have been. But it should be a greater India mutually, not by force.
Not by force.
It shouldn't be that the biggest brother on the subcontinent starts bullying all the littler brothers, no?
Off the camera, we were talking about things that you've said that, 3 things that mankind cannot survive is A, breath, B, sleep, C, food. Okay? In which I would include water as well.
Yeah.
Right? So, and unfortunately, food has been termed as something that a lady's job or something that a lady should be taking care of at home. I also remember a recent incident where, for one of my relatives, I was invited to visit a prospective bride's place, and the first question that was asked to that bride by one of my relatives, was, do you know how to cook a roti, and show us how you cook a roti, which was very demeaning. I mean, I completely was anguished by that particular act. But when it comes to food, when you see that a particular gender has been attached with the food or things, it's very, very upsetting and very disturbing. I'm sure when you started doing this, food history, analogy, and, going deeper into the evolution of food, how it has come today, people must have said that this is essentially a lady's job. Why did you go for it?
So I started doing food studies because my wife told me that I should talk about food and food archaeology. Since I have a small catering business and I'm an archaeologist, I should merge the two together. And I said, too much hard work and you're just biased in my favor because you're my wife. You think I can do anything. And I must tell all the listeners, please listen to your wife.
I agree with
Wives are always right.
I agree with that.
It will make your life far simpler and far easier if you follow this one rule. Listen to your wife and say yes. So a little later, a close friend of hers had started a food studio of her own. And she said, why don't we do a lecture on the archaeology of food? And I said, too much hard work again. So she said, okay, let's do a meal. Where we do a meal through the ages. Something that the Harappans ate, something that Ashoka Maurya ate, something that was eaten by the Cholas, something that was eaten just before the Portuguese came in the Islamic court, some post-Portuguese dishes, some diasporic dishes. And let's curate a menu around that. That was great fun. So we did that. And she announced it. It was a ticketed event. It was completely sold out. And exactly a week before that, she said, Kurush, so this is done. And we have announced that you will be doing a lecture on the archaeology of food before that. I said, are you mad? That's the one thing I didn't want to do. So now it's announced. People have bought tickets.
Oh.
So this was Monday. Lecture was supposed, and lunch was on Sunday. I said, theek hai na. Google ko pooch lenge. Google knows everything. Why do I need to do extra hard work?
Correct.
So I sat down on Google and about half an hour later or 1 hour later, I had a complete and total meltdown. I wanted to be like the proverbial cockroach lying on its back with its hands and legs in the air and throw a tantrum because there was nothing on the archaeology of food in India. Nothing. And I was like, अरे ऐसा कैसा हो सकता है? And there was very little on the archaeology of food in toto. So I had a full meltdown. Saying, अभी क्या करेगा संडे को? इज्जत का फालूदा हो जाएगा. And next day in the morning, I said, okay, enough of this. You've had your pity party. I think best with pen and paper or pencil and paper. So I sat down and I said, what should be in the archaeology of food? What should be in it? Let's start making a list. And I realized it was all there. It was just not looked at as the archaeology of food. We looked at it as paleobotany, animal husbandry, archaeozoology, nutrition, paleopathology, paleonutritive studies, various other studies based on agriculture and farming and housing. But we didn't look at it as food. So I put it together. I still have that PPT, Pratik. I've kept that PPT just to remind myself. It's like that slave who used to stand behind Caesar and say, "Remember Caesar, thou art mortal." That is my remember Caesar, thou art mortal slave. That PPT reminds me how bad it was. But I managed to pull it off that day. Since that day, it's been a complete and total rabbit hole. So with my wife ably standing behind me, she ideates, I execute for her. And we have another friend of ours, and we do something called the Studying Food Workshop, where we look at food not as ingredient, recipe, and presentation. We look at the archaeology of food, the anthropology of food, the sociology of food, philosophy of food, ethics of food. We look at the aesthetics of food. We look at food and art, food and religion. We look at food and media. We look at the future of food. So this is what we call the basic Studying Food Workshop over 10 days. We have a version 2 of it, which were less critical topics that were left out in version 1. We do specialized workshops. We've done one called Studying Desi Daru. We've done one called Studying Millets. We've done one just studying diasporic food. Diaspora coming into India and diaspora leaving India. And double diaspora and triple diaspora and things like that. How their food changes and how their food remembers their roots. Things like that. And we've had some brilliant speakers. I mean, Dr. Krishnendu Ray from New York University is one of our speakers. We've had the ex-head of the Department of English Literature and a great expert on diasporic studies, Nilufa Barucha, come and do lectures with us. So we've had people from all over the place. Krish Ashok talks about the science of food very often with us. And the gentleman who's put India on the food and AI map, Ganesh Bagla. Okay, Ganesh is one of our speakers. So we've had some amazing speakers, great people in the world of food, and built an entire community of we've had about 1,000 students go through slowly over the last, I think, 6 years.
Correct.
And we've built a community of our own. Today, on our WhatsApp page, all you have to do is say, I am going to X. And about 40 people will tell you what to eat there. Whose house to go and eat at. What day to eat where? What is the market? Go to this shop and stuff like that. So it's an amazing community as far as food is concerned. That's the fun part of it. My wife and I love driving. We've also driven over a large part of central and southern India. We hope to do the north in the next few years. And we travel to eat and teach and meet friends.
Wow.
So that's the circle. And all over the place. The last trip that we were out on, we stopped by in Sholapur. And I ate something, in the kind of meal in Sholapur, I tell you, Pratik, which blew my brains because I'd never heard of it before.
Achha.
Okay.
What is that?
So, you've heard of a mutton bhojnalay, right?
Right.
So that is what I speed read. Okay, in Marathi. And I said, let's go here. Sounds good. It isn't a bhojnalay. It's a mutton bhajnalay.
Oh.
Have you ever heard of a mutton bhajnalay?
Never, because I am a vegetarian.
So bhajnalay is where you go with your own mutton.
And then roast it.
And they will cook it for you with their spices on the spot and serve you rotis and your mutton. They will cook your mutton 2 ways. Gravy made, rasse made and sukka. And on the spot, in front of your eyes. And I was completely blown away by the unique nature of this kind of an enterprise. So the fact that the enterprise of food is a continuously evolving enterprise. The kind of amazing food we eat in our country, every corner of our country, every corner of our state of Maharashtra has such amazing food. Vegetarian, non-vegetarian, pescatarian, muttonatarian, whatever you want to call it. Mithai hai, namkeen hai, all of it is there.
Yeah.
And so much is completely evolving continuously. I tell people, that if you want to impress one of your friends and you're living in Bombay or Pune, tell them, chal, aaj Portuguese khane ko jate. And you take them down to the nearby vada pav stall and you give them a vada pav.
That is Portuguese.
Because the word pav itself is Portuguese for bread. And we didn't make this kind of bread till the Portuguese came.
Including pav bhaji.
Yeah, there was no potatoes in India till the
Right.
Portuguese came. There were no chilies in India till the Portuguese came. There was no shengdana for shengdanachi chutney and shengdanacha tel to fry the bloody thing in.
Correct.
So only the kothmir, the haldi and the besan are more or less Indian.
And black pepper maybe.
Black pepper you don't put, no, you put hirvi
Right.
mirchi inside because it's cheaper.
Right.
Cheaper is the whole thing. And what we don't understand is, it's common sense if we use a little brain. Every single language in India, the word for chilies is a derivative of the word for black pepper. Kali miri,
Mirchi.
okay? Everywhere you go, wherever you want to go in India, this is the way it works.
Absolutely.
And this is because we had to come up with a name for it. And the closest taste that we knew was black pepper. Black pepper was expensive. Chilies grow everywhere. Black pepper has a limited range in which it grows. In Maharashtra, we used to eat something which we call lendi pipri. I don't know if you heard of it. It's basically piper longum. It looks like...
longum.
So, if you start eating piper longum, you will stop eating regular pepper. Because it's so much more flavorful. The problem with piper longum was it's a pain to kutao it into a powder. But today we have mixer grinders.
Yeah.
Brilliant mixer grinders. Pop in the bloody things, roast them a little lightly, pop them in, powder them time to time and use that. And where do you have to go to find it today? Invariably, you have to go to a Vaidya's shop. Because in our traditional medicines, this is an important ingredient. So you will go to a Vaidya's shop to find a masala. Can you imagine that?
Oh.
So masalas have multiple purposes.
Right.
And we don't understand why we eat them. So,
Correct.
So much of our food we take for granted.
Agree.
Tomatoes didn't exist in India.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a bhaji today without tomatoes?
Without tomato.
Can you imagine लग्नाच्या बटाट्याची भाजी नसणार तर लग्न कसं होणार? How will you get married without it? No vada pav, no Punjabi samosa. The original samosa is baked and has meat in it.
Correct.
Or has pumpkin in it. Where it comes from. Ours is deep fried and has potatoes in it.
Right.
So, we have adapted, and that's the
Correct.
brilliant thing. But we've forgotten that this is not originally ours. We very happily welcomed it. So why should we be strangers in other things? Why should we not welcome them? I was doing some work on Rajma many years ago, trying to figure out the origins of Rajma. And I asked my friend Veer Sanghvi, I said, could you help me with this? And Veer said, yeah, it's there in so and so. The French brought it. The French brought Rajma to India. Why would the French bring anything to India? And how would they bring it to India? Because it's actually Mexican. And that sent me hurtling down the history books. You see, the French had 2 disastrous episodes of intervening in Mexico. Right. The last time they were there, they propped up the younger brother of the king of Austria as the emperor of Mexico. The poor emperor of Mexico was overthrown and shot. And the French had to leave. But when the French left, they took things back with them. Provisions. Amongst them were beans. So the famous French bean soup, the cassoulet, which is made with white beans, is Rajma. So there are varieties of Rajma, and Rajma does very well because it grows in Mexico at a high altitude in cold conditions. So the best place that it took root in India was at the high altitudes. Now today if you go to Jammu, they will tell you that this is our traditional food. This tradition is not even 150 years old. But I've got no problem with that. I'm just saying, but you should know where it came from. You should know the origins of your food. Because there were other dals which were maybe a little more difficult to cook. Because they were local, they had pests that attacked them. This was foreign, Indian pests had not got used to it yet. So there are dals like moat. Moat is almost not eaten anywhere these days. Production is down. Because we've got other faster growing dals which give you more yield per acre. So automatically as a farmer, if you are getting 100 kilos out of an acre instead of 50 kilos, you will grow 100 kilos. We stopped growing barley, jau, which is so good for us. And we have switched to growing makkah, which is terrible. Less than 4% protein in makkah. And we switched because per acre the yield is better.
Rates are good.
Not rates, volume.
The yield.
So if the volume is bigger, then the rates are also good, no? You know, when there's this rice burning problem, and Delhi every year is dying and suffocating. Traditionally, the Sardars, the Punjabis don't grow rice. Why are they growing rice? What is the reason behind it, and why are they burning this rice paddy? So they're burning the rice paddy because in Maharashtra, where we don't burn the rice, we have to wait till the next year for the next crop. So those rice stalks neatly dry up and are easy to pull out. Here they have to plant the wheat, which is
for the next
season, because they're getting two crops, and they don't have time for things to dry up. And to put a tractor through also, you will still end up with all those clumps of roots and stubble. What will you do with them even after you dug it up by tractor? Better to burn it and give phosphorus, etc. to the soil. Why did they start growing rice? Because when we were dying in the 60s of lack of food, we had this thing called the Green Revolution. Today we find it very casual to blame the Green Revolution for our problems. The Green Revolution was not some magic bullet. It was an emergency stopgap measure. Norman Borlaug's picture should be in every school in India, but it's not. We don't even know his name, because he was a communist, crazy man who gave everything away for free. He didn't believe in getting a patent on any of his devices. Swaminathan and his team took Borlaug's plan and saved India when we were dying of food starvation. To help farmers, the government came up with something called MSP, minimum support price. At this time, the largest portion of our food grains was rice and wheat, but it was still about 40-45%. Almost 50% of the grain we ate was all millets. But we gave these two, number one and number two grain, the MSP, and the people of Punjab said, there's a guarantee to get paid for this. Let's start growing this. Which was sensible, and they saved us. But we didn't put the MSP on millets till very late, very, very recently, and farmers stopped farming millet because there was no guarantee of price.
And whereas now a lot of nutritionists are telling us to go back to millets, and
you know why they're telling us, Pratik? In 2023, our government announced the year of the millet. More than 70 countries around the world agreed with the UN to have the year of the millet. Why did the government suddenly care about our nutrition? Do you know? So the reason is very simple. Climate fluctuation is bringing down the yields of wheat and rice all over the world. But our good friend millet, which is actually 8 or 9 different crops, doesn't give a damn about the monsoon. It doesn't really care about fertilizer. It doesn't care about your pesticides.
Because it's native.
It's very hardy. Right? So the government has realized that if we don't start growing millets, we are up shit creek without a paddle. And the governments have been doing this for quite some time. We know that by 2055, there will be 10 billion of us on this planet. How are we going to feed them? The elephant in the room is our population, which we don't want to talk about. And we don't have enough food to feed all of these mouths.
Because that's really alarming.
Because we don't study food.
Because we don't study food, and we do not emotionalize it to the extent we should be doing. It was fantastic talking to you, Kurush, and it indeed has made my day. Now, with some food for thought, I'm leaving all of you. It was awesome having Dr. Kurush Dalal on the show, and as per our tradition, here is the last part of it, which I'm going to gift him a mug with my signature and get one of his autograph for us. So here we go. It's my turn. First, I will sign it for you, Kurush.
It's very kind of you, Pratik. I collect mugs, by the way.
Wow.
So I will really treasure this.
And me being a black coffee person,
same.
Always do that. So here's yours. Oops. I had to give it to him, right?
24th today, no?
24th February 2025. Okay, here we hold it for the picture. like this with our faces.